Welcome to Legal Meets, a look at legal beyond the law. A podcast by LegalMeets. On this episode of Legal Meets, we meet Mary Juetten, founder and CEO of Traklight, a risk management software platform for intellectual property and one half of legal technology movement EvolveLaw. Hi folks, and welcome to this episode of Legal Meets. Thanks for joining us. I'm joined by Mary Juetten from EvolveLaw and Traklight. How you going, Mary?
I am going well. Thank you for having me, Stevie.
Very nice to have you. And you're sitting in Arizona. I'm in Sydney, Australia, and you've formerly had a life in Australia, I hear?
Yes, I've enjoyed both coasts and particularly Perth with its beaches, although I didn't go in the water because I'm quite afraid of the sharks.
That's right. There's actually been a prolific amount of shark attacks this year, so very, very wise. I want to give the listeners a sense of you're a very busy woman and you've got many different hats that you're wearing, but I want to give people a sense of the Mary behind the scenes. And if TED Talks got in touch with you tomorrow and wanted to ask you to give a talk, and you weren't necessarily talking about legal, you weren't allowed to mention those words, what would you talk about? Is there any hidden talents, secret passions that you want to share with the world?
Well, if I couldn't talk about legal and if I couldn't talk about technology, I think I would just really talk about kind of how to prioritize or how to just, figure this work-life balance, which I think is actually impossible. So my thing is this work-life integration and figuring out about how every day when you get up and you start your day, that you're doing things that excite you. And that's something that over the last year, I've done a lot of things that haven't excited me. So I've been keeping track of those so that I know, okay, this is what I have my eyes on, the eyes on the prize kind of thing. That's what I would talk about.
It's often people talk a lot about knowing what to do. And I think even whether it's career or picking a vocation, sometimes it's about doing something that you don't like and realizing that's something that you hate and knowing not to do that necessarily. But that's interesting. We're going to ask you some more about your productivity tips at the end. But as I mentioned, you're wearing a few hats right now. You're focusing a lot on EvolveLaw, but you've previously been, or you are the founder and CEO of Traklight, which is a very successful IP startup. Do you want to give us a little bit of background as to what you were doing there and how you got to set that company up?
Sure. So my original background is I'm a recovering accountant. So I started off in Canada and I did a lot of work with a lot of different size companies. That was one of the things when I was in school. My dad was always like, oh, just keep your options open. And that's kind of a flavor that has gone throughout my life. But the idea that you, as an accountant, and when you're an auditor or consultant, I ended up being consultant, it really doesn't matter what business you're in. So I got lots of exposure to different businesses, but I kept gravitating back towards services. And I was director of finance at a really large law firm. And I always loved the law and big John Grisham fan. And, I've watched, I don't even want to know how many hours of Law and Order and Criminal Minds and all of this type of stuff. So I ended up going back to law school as my second career, or what was supposed to be my second career as a lawyer. And that was in 2008. And when I was there, I was doing process of elimination. Okay, I want to be a white collar crime prosecutor. Okay, I'm not good at moot court. So, okay. Moving on. So I went through all these different things and I was in this technology venture clinic, which was real life. You got to play a lawyer because you had a supervising real life lawyer. And my supervising lawyer was this woman, Jennifer Lafere. And she's an IP lawyer still here in Arizona. And it was so interesting because I met with these clients, my real life clients. I listened to their problems. I did a stint at Pricewaterhouse as a consultant, and I really enjoyed that part of talking to somebody, figuring out what the problem is and what do we need to do to solve it. So in this case, with several of my clients, they were IP issues, but they weren't really like the filing of the patent. It was more, hey, they forgot to incorporate and assign their patent. They don't have a co-founder agreement. So I was sitting there with some of my classmates talking about this situation with this client. And I was like, if there was just some way that these inventors at the time, so this is my small idea, that these inventors would have like a TurboTax, which is an accounting product, TurboTax for figuring out what IP they have. And that was the genesis of Traklight. And so I told my husband, my very patient husband, that I actually was not going to practice law. And so I'd left corporate America, going back to law school, and I was going to start Traklight.
And he
And
thought you were crazy?
well, he was kind of, he's an engineer, and he was like, so what's the plan, for earning back some money? And so,
Yeah.
so I ended up working for another startup. I actually took a tour in Perth. They have that mining museum, and the gold was there. And I was talking to my husband about gold and the whole idea of cell phones. And so one of my classmates, her dad, and when you go back to law school when you're later in life, you get to meet people's parents who are the same age as you. And so he had this startup, and I went off and I started working with him, and it was in Arizona. And so I got back into the tech scene, and it was, an online electronics platform. So I worked there for a year. And then after the year, my husband basically said, "You have 1 year to get Traklight up and running, and here's X $1,000, go."
So
And
was it a case of the idea, it was just so pronounced and so obvious to you that it would help the world that you just couldn't let it go? Was it one of those things that kept kind of,
well,
knocking on the door?
what happened was during the year when I worked at the other startup, I had a little bit of market research done, and I also, Jennifer Lafere became kind of my mentor. Eventually, she ended up on Traklight's advisory board, and she's actually an investor. So she really believed in the idea. We did market research, and we asked lawyers, like, if clients could know their needs before they got to you, what would you think of that? Well, that would be wonderful. So several takeaways. First of all, if I would have to do it again, I would have done it very differently. but,
Like
but
says every founder ever.
yeah, exactly. And the idea that it was quick and easy said no one. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just
yeah.
but it's one of those things where with Traklight, we're a little bit ahead of our time, because now we're seeing that lawyers are open to using this. But that wasn't our original market. Our original market was to go to these small businesses and have them use it. A couple of things that I learned. First of all, most people, unless they're in life sciences or they're actual hardcore inventors, they think they have no intellectual property. They don't have any IP. So that was like a super annoying hurdle, which we ended up building our questionnaire out and turning it into sort of TurboTax for business risk and IP identification. And we gave up trying to sell to small, medium-sized businesses in 2014. No, sorry, yeah, early 15. So when I created Traklight, my goal was create this software company and make it into this really big company. And then we changed our minds in 2015, and it was more like, let's create this as a white label solution and find a strategic partner. So that's kind of where we're at. We have several big partnerships that we're working on. We've worked with some law firms, but the bottom line with the law firm is, unless they're going to change their process for prospecting clients, it's not going to work even if you buy the technology.
Yeah,
So that's
it's interesting. You just mentioned that you might have been a little bit too early to the market in terms of selling legal technology, and the lawyers were essentially not ready to embrace change. So that brings us to EvolveLaw, which that's almost the ethos of of the company. But you've got a partner in crime, Jules Miller, formerly from Hara & Esquire, who's I think flying through the air right now.
Yes,
and
she
can't join
is.
us for this interview. But basically, you come together. Was there a certain moment that you both, was it like a catalyst that you said, hey, there's a lot of people struggling with the same issue, we need to do something about it? What was that kind of aha moment for EvolveLaw?
Yeah, so what happened was Jules and I met each other early in 2014, and that's when we were starting to talk to lawyers doing our customer development of how do you want to use Traklight, and I was just astounded by the level of, you know, just resistance in general to change. But then even, and not just for Traklight, but for other legal technologies that I was, seeing, because we don't consider Traklight isn't legal tech. I mean, it's technology, it's a software. So in the legal vertical, I was just shocked. And I worked for a very large law firm in Canada. At the time it was 10 years, a decade before. So I would have thought that some things had changed with respect to technology. So Jules and I were sitting there and we were having a conversation. And I had attended demo days in, it doesn't matter what year, I think it was 2012, out in San Francisco, and actually met one of our longtime co-conspirators also in this is Ebrevia, which is Ned Gannon. And so I met Ned at demo days in like 2012. And I thought, well, that's such a better way. If the lawyers can actually see it, instead of me describing to you what Traklight does, if they could actually see it, then hey, maybe they'll be inclined to do a pilot or et cetera. So that was the idea. And so Jules was like, if we could do a demo day. And so we puttered around, and like true entrepreneurs were like, hey, let's try something. Let's try a beta.
Iterating,
yeah. So our first event is almost 3 years ago now. It was in June of 14, but we started planning it early in March of 2014. And we did only big law, and we had 4 companies, and we did demos from the stage. And so that was, and people came, and we got sponsorships, and we didn't lose a dime, because that was kind of remember back to my patient husband. He was like, okay, if you're going to do EvolveLaw, like it has to be break even. So we started out and we would only do events, and we did, I think, 5 or 6 of them, until people started saying in about a year later, people were like, wait, where's the EvolveLaw website? Where's the EvolveLaw information? I want to join. Can you guys? And so it was one of those things which in some ways it was kind of annoying, because both Jules and I had, Jules as her role as co-founder of Hire and Esquire, and me with Traklight, we had toiled along with all of our other legal tech
So it was very
people.
Organic, the process of getting it off the ground.
Yeah, so we had worked so hard on our companies, yet here we were with this concept, which was a sales and marketing channel for anyone who was involved with the events. All of a sudden people were asking us, like, where is it? So that it was actually just one of those things where Jules was busy with Hire and Esquire, but I was in the process of saying, we're not selling Traklight anymore to sales and marketing people. We're not having an office. We're not hiring all these salespeople. We're going to stop selling to small and medium-sized businesses, and we're going to focus on these white label. So we had excess capacity of people as they were leaving, and as people were working, we gave them little projects. And so one of the projects was create the EvolveLaw website, mock it up, and it was kind of funny because Jules was like, if we get I think her number was like 20, or no, maybe her number was 15. And I was like, if we get 10, I'm just like a little bit.
Members? Is that the actual,
initial members, then we'll launch this. So we ended up with 27 founding members.
That's before you even kind of left the gates.
Yeah. And so we had 27 founding members, and we did our first official EvolveLaw event in September at Suffolk University Law School in Boston, and that was in 2015. And by the time we kind of close out June 30th this year, we'll have done 53 events, and we have now over 120 members.
Wow, that's
so
amazing.
It's been crazy, but it's all of us share the same passion and mission to try to get more lawyers using the technology, but the community, or the multiplier effect, the megaphone effect, I think Jules has used that word, is that people actually are paying attention because it legitimizes all of us being together.
Yeah, well, like you said, the initial concepts for just legal tech platforms for law firms might have been too soon, but the organic growth of EvolveLaw said there's a lot of people like willing to champion that change and want to see that change. So that you've kind of created that wave now where it's kind of taken a life of its own, which is fantastic for everyone involved, for the lawyers, for consumers. Next steps. What's on the agenda? What do you guys have planned for the rest of the year? And what's the core of the mission to kind of take it forward from here?
So our goal really is to have our members succeed more, and that success is different for every member. For some, it's finding strategic partnerships amongst the community. For some, it's we have listings in our legal tech toolkit, and we actually have members who've told us, hey, I've been getting calls from investors. So investors now know you can go and check out the legal tech toolkit, and from there you can contact the company. So some people are looking at fundraising. One of our members, Case Text, they were at one of our early events. When we were still doing demos from the stage.
They just raised a big round, right?
Huge round.
Yeah.
So they're wonderful members. They provide speakers, and they're
lovely guys. I think we met them at Codex a little short time ago. So really, again, everyone I've met in the legal tech industry, being a non-lawyer myself, really lovely people. So it's great that it's becoming a close-knit community where everyone can kind of share, feedback and open doors and help each other. So that's great.
Yeah, and for us, it's all about the collaboration. So we've gone from our community to also then reach out to like the big players, the EvolveLaw. And so we've collaborated on several events with them. And then ALM, who puts on Legal Tech, now Legal Week. We have a partnership with them. ABA Tech Show, we've worked with them. That's been great. And we have always placed our events around other people's events because people are in town for it. And then we provide, if you go to our website, it'll say there's $10 to come to our events. It's not a moneymaker. It's actually just so that we don't get people
You just get the serious people, right?
Yeah, we get the serious people. And anyone who's ever interested to come who's in legal tech, if you just email us, we will give you a free link.
Don't give away all the secrets now.
Yeah.
free coffee.
It's really not about the $10. It's just we did this, one of our early events in Los Angeles. This was back like before we actually had a company. 1-400, Alan Rodriguez, another one of our founding members. He and I went to Costco and we got enough food for what we thought was reasonable. There were 145 people signed up, so we got enough food for like 90-ish people. Well, there were only 50 people that showed up, and I've always been one of those people who figures more is better when it comes to food. So we were sending people home with blocks of cheese and bottles of wine.
Yeah, well, take home. The swag bag was a block of cheese. All right, great.
Yes, it's like a parting gift. Here's your cheese. So we've learned a lot. Mike Willie from Traklight spends about half of his day. Anyone who's been involved with EvolveLaw, he's the brains behind all of the website and all of the logistics that goes into that. We couldn't really do it without people like that.
Yeah, of course. And so, everything sounds like it's on track, going really well. But what has been the biggest challenge? What has it been? Resistance from the other side, whether it's investors or just trying to get these events together? What's been the biggest challenge for you guys at EvolveLaw?
So the biggest challenge is kind of trying to be everywhere and trying to figure out like what will bring our members the most value. So like something like the summit that we're doing, or probably by the time this aired might have already happened. So that with the summit, the idea was try to bring together the investors and strategics with 30 of our innovators. And it's the first one we're doing. It's April of 2017. We hope to make it an annual event. It was hard to get, not the innovators and not even the strategics, but it's hard to get people who are kind of legal tech investors. So that's something that's been a little bit of a challenge. That's one of the biggest challenges for our members. So that's where we figure we can add value by doing things like the summit and trying to do events where there can be those collisions between the investors. That said, part of it is also about getting more sales, because the more sales you have, the better you can get in terms of investment. So
are you seeing, again, there's a shifting tide in the legal industry from, I guess, VCs realizing that it's one of the last service industries that haven't really changed in the last, maybe 150 years. Again, I think from the time that LegalMeets was incorporated, there's maybe 200 legal tech startups on Angel's List alone. Now there's, 6 times or 7 times that. So things are definitely changing. Again, Case Tech's $12 million funding round. So those things are all kind of notches on the board. Do you think there's a shift in that kind of sentiment in terms of VCs realizing that, whether it's AI, that the legal world is going to be disrupted by these startups? Again, it's up to the lawyers whether they use this technology as an aid or if it's something that's going to disrupt them if they don't evolve quick enough. But is there resistance still from the VCs?
I think there's always going to be a resistance from the VCs because legal in itself it's not fast moving. So most VCs, as you know, like some of the larger ones like Bessemer has an interesting article out on kind of where they see the disruption to be. And Bessemer is a big player investing in Clio and several other legal tech. But what VCs want in terms of performance and the numbers, and it's usually really quick. So figuring out these strategic partnerships like eBrevia has done with RR Donnelley, where it's kind of a strategic commercial partnership that grows into strategic investment, that then you're working with somebody who understands your sales cycle and understands how you can grow, and they're putting money into the company for growth purposes, and then you have access to their sales channel. That model, I think, works better for legal than your traditional VC. Also, something like Jules is now with LunaCap Ventures, and that's a venture debt fund that's being raised. Personally, with Traklight, we did here in Arizona. They had a program where they did like a matching where you could borrow money, which is unheard of for startups to borrow money. So we used that program, and then we leveraged that into angel investment. Along with we had a contract with Infusionsoft, the CRM here.
Okay.
So
that
we were able
quite successfully for you guys.
Yeah, so that's how we rebuilt our platform based on all of that kind of raise. So I think you just have to be a little bit more creative and a little bit scrappier in the legal tech if you are solidly in the legal tech vertical. If you're not solidly in the legal tech vertical, that might actually be an advantage when you're raising, because if you can scoot over into fintech or something else.
They're not too concerned about the slow adoption within legal. Yeah. I'm sure many pitch decks have been kind of edited, after the first few interviews. Oh yeah, financial services. So is there a possibility that one day EvolveLaw could almost be like maybe a crowdfunding platform for legal tech startups, where maybe like an Angels List almost, where you kind of could list your startup, and then on the other side of the fence you've got investors that would be quite interested to join the party.
So one of the things that we have talked about is trying to figure out, at one point we talked about a fund. I don't know about that. It's like not off the table, but then, the idea of getting together a group of angels. And so part of what we want to do with the summit is see, is there that appetite? Should we get together a group of angels, or is it just more of a, it's big in deals these days to just syndicate. So, are we not necessarily lead investors, but we're providing a way, not necessarily crowdfunding, but a way of kind of matching, and that is what we're doing at the summit, is matching innovators with potential investors. There's also a lot of talk about doing kind of the legal tech roll-ups. I've written about this, the idea that there's a lot of really cool companies. If one big private equity company would come along and sort of scoop a whole bunch of the best and brightest up and create kind of a competitor for the larger players like Thomson Reuters and Wolters Kluwer, that might be really interesting. And we would be happy at EvolveLaw to help any PEs interested.
Yeah, no, well, in the true sense of, like you said, it's been this organic progression to date, the operative word being evolve. So it's going to be interesting where it's going to take you, because I think the market's going to kind of keep knocking on your door and telling you guys where to go, which is exciting. So yeah. And
we do have like a thing every time someone says evolve at an event, we tell people they have to drink, but I realize it's kind of early.
Is it the lawyers are turning into like airline pilots? I think it's kind of like constantly inebriated. Well, legal technology and women in tech, those kind of two terms have both almost been kind of historic oxymorons in a sense. Now that again the tide is shifting, there's kind of a lot more happening. Initiatives in companies about diversity, especially just in the tech world. Are you seeing more women founders and engineers? Is there kind of, you're involved with a lot of these startups through EvolveLaw, but just generally in the rest of the market, specifically in legal, let's just say, are you starting to see a rise in whether it's developers, engineers, founders being women?
I find that in legal tech, it's actually disproportionately more women.
Right, okay, interesting.
It's one of the things that I really like about Evolve Law is it's more evenly split. I mean, I've gone to lots of events. I'm active in the Phoenix startup community, also up in Seattle where we have our home in Seattle area adjacent. You'll go to events like even an Evolve Law event, and you look at the lawyers and you look at the people that are in tech, and there's just seems to be a really interesting split. And it's more, it's not half and half, but it's closer, it's
No,
above a third.
I think you're definitely right. So why do you think that is? I mean, is it maybe I guess the recovering lawyers leaving the legal industry, and kind of maybe the women are kind of see that maybe the office dynamics kind of don't suit so well, and maybe that they're kind of going, hey, you know what, I can actually go out on my own and do something from scratch and be the boss. What do you think it is?
I think a lot of it is that, big firms, and this isn't just legal. I mean, also like in the accounting world, engineering, all of they're just not set up for women who want to have, kind of the infamous have it all.
Yeah.
So while there are lots of lawyers, who have left, who are male, it just seems like there's more women who are like, hey, there's got to be a better way of earning a living. So I'm either going to leave big law or medium law, and I'm either going to create a company or I'm going to become a lawyer that runs my own practice. Yep. There's just so many women who have reached out to me because one of the other things I did last year was write a book for Thomson Reuters about key performance indicators and small
in your spare
law.
time, yeah.
Yeah, in my spare time. No, it actually came out of trying to sell Traklight to lawyers, and I was explaining the cost of their client acquisition, and I was explaining to them opportunity costs, and I'm thinking, why don't they understand these? These are business concepts. And then I realized, okay, most lawyers don't even think they're running businesses. So I, through Evolve Law, I met the Thomson Reuters folks, and they asked me to write the book. And part of it is that as I'm going around and talking about KPIs and the business and everything, I just get so many women lawyers who come up to me saying, okay, I want to implement this technology and I want to do this with performance measures. Can you help me? Can you point can you point me in the right direction of the right tech and everything? And I just think sometimes women are a little bit more open to change.
Well,
So
I
that
think
could be
the great thing is having yourself and Jules in that position right now probably makes a lot of other women feel more comfortable, and actually, like you said, approaching you, seeing the examples that not only have you both been founders of legal tech companies, but you're also now championing the new wave of legal technology and knocking down the walls. So I think you both poster childs in a sense now for that. So that's very encouraging.
Well, thanks. That's very nice of you.
Yeah. So, well, you just mentioned something that kind of got me thinking. The lawyers that you said were kind of coming into touch with this book, they were maybe too reliant on the billable hour, and then not necessarily being taught the skill set or the acumen to actually run a business, or not even in the mindset that, hey, I'm running a business as more of a vocation. So do you think that's been kind of like a backdrop that's set them up for, I guess, a little bit of that lack of innovation, because they don't see it as a business where they're constantly trying to see what the market wants, constantly trying to tweak systems and be more efficient?
Yes, because most lawyers, I mean, if you're talking to a lawyer and they make $1 million plus a year, and it's one of those, the old, if it isn't broken, I don't need to, why change? So, I mean, one of the things that I started telling people is, if you're not interested in changing, change it. if you're not interested in changing, don't buy my book. Don't
Yeah.
implement technology. Just don't,
Yeah.
because it's just painful for both sides. And, I've had clients who have bought Traklight and then they won't change a thing. And then they wonder why it doesn't work. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, how's it supposed to work if you never even tell somebody it's there
Yeah.
to,
Right.
to act as an issue spotter or triage or whatever? So it's,
It's the whole mindset, right? It's not just like kind of buying some technology or subscribing to a few SaaS platforms.
yeah, and one of the things that I think is going to happen more and more is that lawyers are going to start evaluating technology just not for, it's not a cost benefit in terms of, okay, I'm going to pay this much and it's supposed to, save me this many hours. It's also like, what are the other possibilities with it? And if you don't embrace that this is sort of like pulling on the yarn and it starts unraveling or whatever in a good way,
Yeah.
it's uncovering these possibilities. So people who, it's like anything else, what you put into it, you get out of it. And I'm full of these sayings today, apparently.
It is rolling off. Well,
So,
I guess you've been again on both sides of the fence here, and you're dispelling a lot of advice and maybe some battle scars, and
yeah.
it's good.
So
You're
I mean,
purging.
with lawyers, I think that there are so many lawyers who are super excited about this and they want to go out, but some of them unfortunately go out and buy a whole bunch of technology without really a plan on how they're going to change their process or their practice.
Yeah.
And then they might see it, not even, they might try to use it, but if you don't, if you have a process that's 10 years old and it's based on, not a system like a Clio where it's, built for you to have this virtual law firm, then if you don't change anything, you're probably not going to be as satisfied as changing a bunch of
Well, that's
things.
why I like a lot of what Kenneth Grady, who's actually been on the podcast, I like a lot of what he talks about in terms of identifying, the actual processes and what you need to do, and then finding the technology to kind of to help necessitate that, as opposed to kind of buying a bunch of technology because everyone else is kind of using it and then going, okay, now what do I do and how's it meant to help me? Actually identifying those, blockages and bottlenecks, and then going from there. So interesting times ahead for legal technology. Specifically, again, you've been an angel investor, a founder, and now again with EvolveLaw, you've worked in the corporate world in the US. What kind of advice could you dispel, maybe specifically for legal technology founders or startups that are actually out on the fundraising trail, knocking on doors? What's the one bit of advice that you could give them? Again, you mentioned that you might have done things a little bit differently. Crystallizing your experience in the startup world, what's that one bit of advice that you kind of give someone?
Well, I think the most important thing when fundraising is that you don't go out too early. It's kind of like when you launch a product. Don't go out too early. Don't go out too late, obviously, because you'll run out of money. But fundraising is really just a sales process. So make sure that you're applying the same principles that you do for your sales process. So pre-qualify who you're talking to so you don't waste their time and don't waste your own time. And the big thing for fundraising is, I think in legal tech, you have to have lawyers that have actually used your technology. So when we were fundraising, we weren't fundraising specifically for legal tech. But so we had a large company here in Arizona who was one of our customers, who gave us a quote from their CTO, who's also a lawyer, because we were in the kind of, the legal space, but we weren't trying to sell to lawyers. And that was really helpful when we were fundraising. So if you're a lawyer who's left a law firm, get your law firm to use your product, even if they're not paying for it. But the best thing would be paying customers that are lawyers, and make sure, the other tip that I always tell everybody, regardless of industry, is make sure you do the ask. Like, getting to a fast no is always better than flailing around with a whole bunch of maybes and a whole bunch of wasted time. Because
that's probably the biggest trap for early stage startups right there, because anyone that wants to listen, they're kind of like, hey, we got to kind of talk, and then you turn around and especially a lot of the time it could be law firms, and they're not necessarily going to be a quick investor. So you might be looking, you might be best suited talking to angel investors that can act quickly and kind of have more faith in you, as opposed to having the thousands of customers that you need to kind of get VC money. So interesting feedback. Okay, Mary, we're gonna kind of get into the tail end now. No, well, that's great advice. I think that you kind of hit it on the head there. It's kind of been our experience as well. So I think you kind of hit that on the head. So a few parting shots for before we go. But you mentioned at the start that you would probably give a few pointers on productivity if you were giving a TED talk. And again, the fact that you're juggling family, multiple startups, events, it's all very impressive. So we'll just start with basically what are you using as a phone? Is it Android, Windows, or iOS?
iOS.
iOS, okay. And so apart from the actual phone, what other bit of technology kind of does your world kind of evolve around? What is it that you just can't live without?
Well, I can't live without the little notes feature. I know other people use
fancy ones, yeah.
Fancy
Evernote
ones.
And whatever else.
No. So I run my entire family and everything between the notes on my phone
Shopping lists and whatever else.
and Post-its.
Yep.
The entire.
Is the house covered in that?
It's when I'm at events, I can't take out my phone and try to put in the notes. It's so much faster. I always have Post-its in my purse, and then I just write down everything, and then I just accumulate these Post-its. So then Mike Willie always laughs at me. I will have this pile from when I've been traveling for a couple of weeks, and it's actually so
It
cleansing.
works for you.
It's so cleansing when you do them, and then
you get rid of them all and organize them. So it tickles that little bit of OCD kind of.
Yeah, Monica Zent from Foxworthy showed me this Post-it app. I think it was Monica, and so I still haven't used it. I'm going to use it for one of my. I have a couple of books that I'm writing. One of them's on IP, and so I'm going to use that. You can you put all the Post-its and you take a picture, and then you can move the Post-its around. So it's perfect for storyboarding. But basically,
you probably like that tactile, feeling of actually doing it, right? So
yeah, and then I've always been a huge list person. I tried to get away from the lists. I tried this whole other process. It was an abysmal failure. So my productivity tip, though, this is what I do is I get up and I go through in my head. I look at my list and I look at. Hopefully, my pile of Post-its is gone, and I basically figure out what do I have to do that somebody else is waiting on and then I reward myself. My favorite thing is writing. So, as long as I'm not writing under a deadline, if I can get all my to-dos off my list, then I'm allowed to go write.
So you can set some time aside to actually write.
Yeah. So then I reward myself because when I write, I'll shut off my email and I put on Spotify and I'm in my own little world, and that makes me happy.
So I was going to say, because a lot of the time, when you're writing content for a business, it's difficult to actually get into that creative headspace because you got deadlines. You feel like you're writing like a journalist writing for the New York Times or something. So do you find that ritual actually kind of again opens up your mind to that prospect of, hey, this is kind of a bit of me relaxing, kind of, because you kind of create this time block. So does that feel more that it's a bit of a reprieve and you're being productive, but at the same time you can relax?
Yeah. So most of the stuff that I write about, even KPIs, I make it creative I make up these fictitious firms that, so I make up these little stories. I'm just doing an article now for law practice management. It's going to be in the finance issue, and it's a different way of looking at KPIs. So you're the law firm and you want to figure out what your ideal client is, so you actually don't use client facing KPIs for that. You actually use these others. So it's kind of fun to me. I started this morning and then I got diverted because I had Traklight things and I had all these other things to do. So I haven't really gotten back to it. I have to go to the Apple
So is there
Genius part tonight, so that's even worse. But the whole critical path thing is the way that I think is, okay, I need to get this to Mike because Mike needs to do something with it. And so I will not let myself do anything that...
You don't want to stop the flow of everyone else's productivity either, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So okay. that is critical. And the other thing I do is I religiously get my email box down. It's funny.
You're one of the zero people? Okay.
I'm one of those zero people. And my email box is my to-do.
Yep.
So I just get everything out of there. And it's funny because Alma Assay, who's founder of Allegory Law, she and I were at Sam Glover, who you've had on the show,
TBD
at
law,
his,
yeah.
yeah, we were at TBD Law together. And so we're like the opposites, because she's got like, I can't remember the number of emails that she's had. And I'm like, if I have more than 25, I'm having a bad
Yeah,
day. Like
you're panic attacks coming,
yeah,
setting
so
on.
I was just showing her, like, I try to do, it's like a super old management principle, but like it's the equivalent of only touching a piece of paper once. Like, I don't just read an email and then not deal with it. I try to deal with it right away. But then I also shut off my email for big periods of time during the day.
Yep.
And that really helps.
No, it sounds like there's, again, a few different productivity tips intertwined there that really come together nicely. So, I mean, look, a lot of lawyers that I talk to religiously live inside their inbox, which, again, it's starting to kind of change. There's, better tools coming. Some email tools are bringing more, I guess. There's one plugin that can turn your Gmail into like almost like a Kanban chart. We can have to do, like get things done. So it's kind of similar to kind of what you mentioned there. All right, and is there one other kind of, I guess, ritual that you do daily that keeps you sane, whether it's a pot of coffee, meditation, just a ritual in the morning?
Every morning I have my coffee and I don't check my email first. I don't bring my laptop into it used to be my laptop lived beside my bed.
Yeah,
So
so
now
bad,
the only reason my phone is beside my bed is my favorite thing is I wake up in the morning and I get on my Kindle app and I read for fun for about a half an hour. And,
Oh, great.
Then I'm supposed to go meditate and do exercise and all that other stuff. But
5 hours of yoga and whatever.
That is what I'm still striving to do.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to let you get back to kind of, changing the legal world, changing the face of women in technology, hitting your to-do list and getting to your inbox to zero. But it's been lovely talking to you today, and we look forward to keeping tabs on how EvolveLaw is going. It's very exciting. And so, as a legal technology, thank you for championing the cause. But it's been great to have you on. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for having us. And if you ever want to invite Jules and I to Australia, have a passport. So
working on it.
Thank you so much.
The first EvolveLaw summit in Australia.
That would be awesome.
Sans the sharks. Thanks, Mary. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.